Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, January 10th, 2023. Please rise for a moment of silence. The Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson? Here. Carmody?
Here.
Fishbein?
Here.
Laughlin?
Here.
Marone?
Here.
Tata?
Here.
Testa? Zandri?
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Can I have a motion on what remains on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept the consent agenda items A through F and H through J.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those items pass. Item 3G has been removed from the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve appropriation of funds in the amount of $65,000 from the ARPA revenue fund to $5,000 to regular salaries and wages and $60,000 to administration expenses.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Tata, you were moved first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I removed this just because I had some questions about the prior expenditures and also the ones going forward. I believe the council all received the comptroller's memo. I had requested to see whatever we had paid to the consultants thus far, basically any money that has come out of the ARPA funds thus far, and for the invoices, if possible, to see just what we were billed for in the past. And so we have here some figures. I didn't see the invoices, but it looks like it was all to UHY, and then just the one expenditure to Matthews Printing for the inserts that we put in the electric bills, I believe. So basically my questions are just, number one, I guess, prior money that we spent, specifically what that was spent for, but more so for the $65,000 going forward. It says that it's for the next phase of the project. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that I think just from discussions, I think maybe some of us are unsure of what the consultant's role is going forward. And so I just want to make sure that we are all clear on what we're spending the money on. I just don't want us to see a bill later down the road and we think that it was something that we thought the committee was going to do, but we actually had the consultant do, or vice versa. So I don't know who wants to maybe explain what the next phase would be or what that would entail, but that's the question. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So this request is for when I got the November bill for what the consultant was working on. I only had $9,002 left to pay them, and it was too late for me to come to the December meeting. So to not have to keep coming back, we kind of projected out. That's probably what we're going to need to get through what they're doing now, working with the applicants. So that's kind of where that number came from. I was unable to, I didn't have staff available to make you invoices in time. I can get that for you.
Yeah, that's okay.
So that's where we're at. So if you approve this $6,000, I have the bill that I have to pay for November and December, which equals $21,375. So that will leave $47,000 still available for me to pay the consultant. When I was talking about the next phase, is in the finance office. We've had it pretty easy so far because we haven't spent any money. So I have to do a quarterly filing report on a federal system that's not very user-friendly. And once you start approving these projects, each one of these grants is gonna have to get put into that system. So we're gonna be using a consultant for, setup advice. And, I'm gonna have to get structure in our general ledger so that we can report it properly and then get it into the system properly. So that's kind of what I meant by the next phase.
Yeah, just further on that, the consultant now is reviewing the applications received, looking for completeness, they're lacking any information, and they're doing that cursory review. Once it passes that, then it would go to the committee. So Finance Department has to use the consultant, but also the consultant right now has to go through all of those applications.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The 5,000 is just in case the committee asked for someone to take the minutes. And so we figured they're gonna start meeting, and we just didn't wanna have to keep coming back, so that's where the 5,000 is for.
Thank you.
Counselor Carmody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had similar questions as Councilor Tata, and many of those questions have been answered. But I guess, just for my understanding, so you said we have incurred $21,000 in expenses so far from the consultant?
No. Sorry, no, we have spent money out the door, right, is 31,000 if we're gonna round. I have $21,375 worth of invoices that I need to get paid that I can't pay right now because I don't have the appropriation.
Okay, so to this point, we have essentially incurred $52,000 worth of consulting fees. Yes. Okay. And then, can you make an estimate as to how much more money we're going to be spending?
I would hope that this is all we would need, but I'm not sure how it entailed what they're doing right now, how much time they're spending.
I had hoped that they would be here by phone tonight, especially since it looks like we're going to be spending close to $100,000. It would have been nice for them to participate and answer any questions that we had. You did reference this phase 2 in your memo, and I guess I'm understanding it as them helping assist you in the federal filings rather than whatever else they're doing at the moment, which is that's really what I want to know, what exactly they're doing right now.
So, as the mayor said, right now, they're reviewing all the applications to make sure that the grant fits the ARPA funding. So if something does not meet any of the requirements, they're going to kick it out so that we're not going to have trouble down the road.
And I know this question, it really isn't for you, but we do have a volunteer committee, and I feel like some of this work is redundant. The committee, I think, was tasked with reviewing all the applications as well. So I'm just worried that we're possibly spending more money than we need to be spending.
My belief of how the process worked is the committee shouldn't be getting anything that the consultant deemed inappropriate.
So are you
Not
saying,
valid.
the committee, it was my understanding that the committee will have the opportunity to see all applications that were submitted to the town.
That part,
Certainly, the applications are public, so I don't see any problem with anyone seeing all of the applications, but I don't think the committee necessarily would have the detailed knowledge of the ARPA standards, the expectations of the federal offices as to what we're doing with the money. I don't think the committee members would have that, so that's why we had a consultant with that expertise to review make sure that what's being requested meets with the standards and the regulations and law, and then that would be passed on to the committee to review and determine if they felt it was a good plan, bad plan, whatever. But I don't think the committee members as a whole would have any real expertise about what the ARPA standards are.
But will the committee be able to see all applications that have been submitted?
Certainly, if they, any of us can see any application that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Fishbein?
Yeah, just to take off on that, it's my understanding that the consultant is being used as sort of like a gatekeeper. You know, is this application, as it came in, does it have all the stuff? And then if it doesn't, my understanding is that they're to reach out to the applicant to say, do you have this thing to make this application complete? And ultimately, if that application cannot be put into and cannot have what is required, then I don't know that there's any need for the committee itself to review that application if it doesn't have the backup that we originally said. But, so that's a different issue, but it's not double work. It's, you know, these are the applications that are correctly submitted, and then the committee says, okay, you know, they score it based upon what we said. So it's two different things. There's a bit of an overlap, but I don't have a problem with the overlap. Mr. Senna, I just wanted to ask you some questions about the backup. The third page, I guess it is, in the upper left-hand corner, it says ORG. See that? So I'm just, you know, I was looking at this. Where does this come from?
Sorry, that's part of our financial system.
And it's not an Excel spreadsheet system.
So I downloaded it into the spreadsheet so I can get it on one sheet because it was crossing fiscal years. So it came from our system, right out of our system, and then I cut and pasted so that I could show you the detail on one page. I would have had to give you 3 different reports.
So the order that these are in are based upon what you chose to do?
It's just that was the first one that I downloaded into Excel. That became the first one. So it is out of order compared to the other sheet, but the numbers do tie out.
Yeah, because I was looking at the dates, and like the second line is actually the first date and time, and the third line is actually the last date and time. And I was concerned that we are using a system like that. But am I to understand, looking at lines 3, 4, 5, and 6, the fourth column indicates that it was expended in 2023. That's not correct. November 18 of 2023 has not come yet.
Fiscal year end, 2023. So it was spent, so anything on this report that's July, August, so August, September, October, November, those are the first months of the 2023 fiscal year.
Okay, so the heading on that column should say fiscal year and not.
Yes.
Okay, just to be clear. So then the expenditure to Matthews Printing,
That was the mailing.
So they did I thought the flyers went in the electric bill. Was this separate and apart from that?
That was the cost of the flyer that got mailed out.
Yeah, so all Matthews did was print a flyer,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
And who made the decision, if you know, to expend the money, the ARPA money for that flyer?
That was approved by council.
I know we approved the flyer, but I don't recall the expenditure coming before us.
I would have to go back to check the meeting, but when we approved, the same meeting that it was approved for the Secretary, that expense was approved to use ARPA funds for that.
Okay, and maybe I missed it, I just flag it because, you know, many times the Board of Education has come to us and said, we have a printing operation, and we can print stuff for general government. And, you know, if all they did was print, when we could have had Board of Ed do it, I would think at a lesser cost. And maybe I missed it when, you know, it came before us, but I think we're missing an opportunity there. So that's it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions, but I also want to emphasize that, you know, I hope that as part of this process that if the consultant deems an application doesn't meet criteria, that it's passed along with that information, because, you know, I want the committee to still get it and see why he said no on it, you know, because there might be a way to rectify it, there might be a way to fix it or change it or ask for the additional information. I'm good if the consultant says, hey, this doesn't meet criteria and it'll never go through, but if it was because something got forgotten, overlooked, or wasn't completely delineated, I'd rather have the opportunity for them to come forward and maybe still, you know, meet the conditions to be reviewed. And that was one of the reasons why we voted to up the ceilings on that. I didn't want technicalities or, you know, issues with the ceiling to get in the way of putting through things that are valid. I do have a quick question, and Mr. Senator, you might not have all the information, and that's okay, because it just kind of dawned on me, we were talking about this $65,000 allocation. Do you happen to know roughly, in total, all of the ARPA money that we've allocated / spent between the consultant prior and then what we've allocated into the budget? Do you have a ballpark number on that?
The only thing that's been appropriated is the second sheet of that memo that I gave you.
What about the amount of funds that were put into the budget and that were approved?
Those weren't approved. They were recommended to be for ARPA funding, but they still have to come before you guys to be appropriated.
All right, so they're in the budget book, they're outlined, but they have to, so the money hasn't been appropriated out to a line item yet?
Correct.
Okay, so,
And I believe that was just going on the basis that we didn't want to spend governmental money till we.
so you had to. Okay, so there's an allocation for it, but we haven't approved the expenditure and it hasn't been transferred to a line item.
Correct.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I need to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I see no more hands on the council. Any questions, comments from the public? Mr. Glidden, I saw your hand first.
Mike Glidden, Pomeroy Avenue. Just one question, maybe if the council could get this answer. Back in December, we were promised that we would start seeing the applications. I'm the vice chair of the ARPA committee. We were promised by January 6th we would start seeing not-for-profit applications, that the consultant's review would be completed by January 13th. I'm just giving these dates from an email from Chairman Burdinsky. I wish he was here tonight to speak to this because he was hearing this directly from, I believe, Janice Small and the consultant. So you're allotting money, and yet we have yet to see the service. We have delayed now our review because we have canceled our meetings, and most likely we'll cancel all our meetings in January because we have not yet to see a single application. We were, like I said, we were supposed to be done with seeing at least the not-for-profits by January 13th. Then the businesses, we were supposed to get the business applications by February 8th. We're not receiving any service. I would recommend that you don't pay a dime to the consultant until we start seeing these applications. Because, you know, these are dates that were agreed to, and obviously they failed to fulfill their commitment. So please do not allot a single penny more to this consultant until the service is delivered.
Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. I'm a member of the ARPA committee, just so it's out there. Chair, to Mr. Senna. You said that the bill that you have is through November?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know what that time period is. So we don't have December's bill. In December, they were supposed to have gotten the applications December 9th. So you have a good period of time that they've probably been working on these applications, or I would hope that they've been working on these applications.
We do have December's bill. I just got it 2 days ago.
And how much is that bill? Do you know that?
$11,375.
Okay. And you are appropriating 60,000?
That is the request, yes.
So then you've got, so it's 11 for that month, and that wasn't a full month. So you're gonna be, okay. And then, so you're saying, and just out of curiosity, because you brought it up, every applicant that gets a grant, you have to do an individual form for the feds?
Not a form, but I have to go set up a project in their system.
For each, so if there's 150, so if there's 200 and something applications, you have to do 200 and something forms, or however you want to call it in your system.
Well, I'm going to have to do one in our general ledger, and I'm going to have to do one in the federal system.
So for ABC Corporation, DEF Corporation, HGI Corp, every one, you have to do a separate one? Or,
Correct.
so that's going to take quite a bit of time, but you're doing those, not the consultant.
Correct. Once they get us established of what we have to do, we will be doing it.
Okay. Another question. I forgot a pen tonight, so I had to put everything here. It's just curious, out of the way the questions were asked, how much was the printing? I mean,
$1,900.
it wasn't crazy numbers then. It just, I know it's, if you can make a savings, it's a savings, but, so, all right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Comerford.
Can I just make one comment first? We could still appropriate the money, and you can direct me not to pay the consultant until the product's delivered.
Okay.
Comerford, Broadview Drive. I'm just curious, is there an outline of the responsibility of this consultant? What their role is in a time frame, completion, tasks, to obviously set some kind of parameter that makes sure that this person is in compliance with the requirements? Is there such a thing?
Can you repeat the question?
Is there a document that outlines by which this consultant is supposed to be following and the protocol, the deadlines? For example, I just heard gentleman, Mr. Glidden, who says he's the vice president or the vice chairman of this committee, and that there were certain deadlines from whom, town attorney or whomever it was, that were supposed to be met. Now, my question is there a schedule? For example, my taxes are due by a certain date, and I have to comply. Does this guy or this company have certain deadlines that have to be met? And that's my first question.
So there is a contract in place with the consultant. The questions you're asking is something that the law department was handling and not my department. So I don't believe that there was hard deadlines. I think there might have been guidelines, and I think they might have given you, we hope to get it to by this date, but I don't think they were bound to it.
Okay, the law department's here. Can you answer that, law department?
No, Attorney Small is familiar with that, but if you want to call the office tomorrow, we can give you that answer.
So it behooves me, because I would have thought that anybody with common sense would have a schedule, that it would say, okay, if it's the 13th, there's the 13th. You might have a leeway, plus or minus 1 or 2 days. Here we are potentially paying somebody that isn't even, in my opinion, from what I heard tonight, in compliance with what everybody, I believe here, thought that was supposed to be met. So if they're not met to the 13th, and these people that are donating their time have to cancel their meetings, people are waiting on money, this guy doesn't, this company doesn't show up. I think I watched the government TV a couple times where this isn't the first time that this happened, that this person or this company was supposed to potentially call in or whatever, and it just delays the process.
The bottom line on this is that we could not specify the date on which they would get the applications. That was well past the time that reasonably could have been expected. It was December 9th. No one knew it was going to wait until December 9th to close the application process until weeks before that. And we had retained the consultant before that. So when things reach a point where decisions can be made, then the parties do their due diligence and act. But there was no way to have specific times for elements that was impossible to estimate.
It bothers me again because, like I said, I'm not too familiar with this, but it sounds to me that deadlines aren't being met, and it's just moving the goalposts every time that this thing comes up. I agree with the vice chairperson. I wouldn't spend anything until you get some firm commitment, because this thing's dragging out worse than a love affair. Thank you.
All right. I see no other hands. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson,
Mr. Chairman, before we vote, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, the suggestion had been made to not, or Mr. Senna had said something about instructing him to not pay the bill until we saw some production. Would that be appropriate for an amendment?
We could do that separately. This is just moving the money into a different budget line.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just on that point, as we all know, there's no firm date by which we've talked to the consultant about it all. We don't know that they're not doing anything. And now to say, oh, we're not going to pay you, as if we know that they're not working, I don't understand why we would immediately be calling them out as if they're derelict when there's been no discussion about this with them as to a time certain.
Not only that, in the November, the council, there was a council motion passed that delayed the process to force the town, the administration, to submit its list of projects. So I think that contributed to the frustration of Mr. Brudzinski's original timeline. Councilor Fishbein.
So, I would be adverse to holding back money. The invoices, obviously the consultant has done work on behalf of the town under the contract already. They've given us guidance, they've been at meetings, they're being compensated for that. My understanding is that their role at this point is not to review an application and then dribs and drabs to release the application, but to complete the work that they're supposed to do with regard to the entirety of the applications and then release the whole packet itself. We have no evidence before us that they are not actively working on those applications, and therefore it would be inappropriate. Now, perhaps it would be appropriate for the law department to check in and just find out where they are with this, but absent that, it's a peremptory breach of contract. So we don't have any basis by which to do that, and I just wanted to express that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Levin.
Yeah, thank you. We don't know what was actually invoiced to Mintz for past work, unless they, in November or December, billed us for the work done in January or due in January, which I don't think is the case.
All the billings are for past work.
Yeah, and so I think we're keeping the process moving forward.
Councilor Carmody.
Thank you. I certainly think we should pay invoices for work that has been done. I'm just curious as to what they're doing presently and what they're planning to do in the future. And I would have liked to have had an update from them to explain that, but it seems like no one really knows at this moment. So I think I'll be voting no at this time.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson,
Yes.
Carmody,
No.
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes, motion passes. On to the public question and answer period. Mr. Michael, name and address for the record, please.
Jason Michael, 81 Meadow Street. Just two quick questions. The first, for a few years now, a handful of years, there's been concrete blocks or mafia blocks shutting down parking lots in parks. They used to appear in November and then be removed in April or around there. And I never agreed with it, never understood it. Then a couple of years ago, they stopped being removed. They just got pushed to the side. But lo and behold, they're back. And I just want to know whose directive it is and to whom it was decreed. In other words, sitting as a commissioner for years, it never came across our bow as to who decided to close parking lots for the winter. As the winters are more and more mild, I don't understand the purpose of not allowing people to park at a park. I don't get it. So if anybody could answer that as to who made that decision and why it continually is made. For instance, I'll give the examples. Up at Veterans Park, the upper lot for the community garden is open. However, you can't travel to the back of the park to use the fields, to get on the trailheads without traversing the entire parking lot. At Woodhouse, the soccer fields, they put these barriers 15 feet off the road so 4 or 5 cars can park. And at Upper Harrison, on that road that just had tens of thousands of dollars of asphalt work and tree trimming on the upper part of Harrison, there have been blocks there for 8 months, closing the road. And I'm just curious as to who made the call. Who decided that that's what we're doing?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that would be Public Works. I think in certain times of the year, they find that there is dumping, there is destruction, there's been vandalism regarding the fields. When there is heavy snow, they discourage people from trying to go into the parking lot. They don't plow those lots. So,
Right, so
I believe it's Public Works trying to avoid some of the problems that have resulted from leaving the lots open.
Thank you. I don't quite understand that as to if I'm going to be a derelict and dump a couch at Vets Park, I don't need to drive to the back of the park to dump the couch. I'm going to dump it in the upper lot or dump it on the side of Woodhouse Avenue. Again, I don't think that the poor acts of a few should affect the many. I'm an outdoorsy person. All the people I know are active, especially when it's 50 degrees out, 45 degrees out in January. December, I was in a t-shirt a couple of days. I don't understand. That doesn't fly with me. I didn't know Public Works could just decide that. I don't know if Parks and Rec is part of the decision. They have a meeting tomorrow, which I was hoping to get to. I can't. Their next meeting is in April, so the point would be moot at that point. I just don't understand how this wasn't discussed. It was just Public Works decided we're going to block off parks and then leave the blocks all year long and then slide them back out again. If they're not plowing the lots anyway, if I drive in there and get stuck, it's my problem. So it doesn't stop them from having to plow lots that they used to plow. They didn't plow them. So is this a good idea to just shut these parking lots down for what I can't figure to be a very good reason? And if it's not being decided here and Public Works is just making the decision, do I have to go to Public Works and ask about that? Or where do I go?
I suspect the answer lies somewhere between Public Works and Parks Department.
Okay. So would it be a direct call to either department? Does it have to be a letter written?
I make phone calls.
Okay. And if the answer is no, which going to assume, we're not going to move these blocks for you, one person. What path do I travel? Is it a request that you direct Public Works to not close parking lots in the winter in parks?
Certainly, I can talk with Public Works and listen to what their rationale is. There's not an immediate finding one way or another on my part, but, you know, I would listen to the reasons they do what they do, and if they're rational and reasonable, then it's unlikely that I would tell them to change.
Okay, because I had heard that before about the dumping, but people don't dump trash in the winter only. The availability to dump in those parks is 12 months a year. And so that, it doesn't really fly for me. It didn't back when I was on the commission asking about it, but I was, you know, shoved to the side. I'm just curious. And not to take too much time, but my second question is, there was a park safety inspection done in late October. Is there a written report from that inspection, either Town Hall, at Parks and Rec? I called the risk manager, and there is no report in his office that wasn't generated by his office. So I'm curious if, I just want to, I'd like, in other words, I'd like to see it, because all those steps have been taken to address some of the things which would indicate they were safety issues. There's still parallel issues in other parks that are not being addressed. And if there's no written report, there's no roadmap as to how these things are going to be rectified and when.
The maintenance issues are directed by the Parks Department. I would get in touch with the director, Kenny Michaels, and ask him what are the plans for the specific items you have in mind. I don't know that they have a report yearly, annually. They go out and they review what the situation is in the parks and make a determination of what they're doing.
So there's no written report required for
I haven't
safety.
seen a written report. You could check with Mr. Michaels and find out if he has a written report or anything in writing with regard to that. But they go out and they together determine where there are problems and take action.
Okay, thank you. This is more directed at the risk manager, as Director Michaels self-admittedly is not a certified safety inspector. So I would imagine that the certified safety inspector would write a report. I don't think that's crazy to think. But I know there's none there, so there's not one being required.
To my knowledge, there's nothing required, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Comerford.
Bill Comerford, Broadview Drive. Last time I was here was at the November 22nd Town Council meeting, and I don't want to seem like I'm pontificating by any means. In those minutes, it says Councilor Allison does not agree with the amendment and feels the building should be cleaned to a certain standard. Those are the minutes of that meeting that I attended. And at that same meeting, I had brought up the downstairs men's bathroom vent, a couple other vents. I don't know if any town councilor had the opportunity to go look at any of those, but they're in the exact same condition from November 22nd as of 20 minutes ago. I took a picture of it. I'm going to send it to all the town councilors. And I also suggested that all the town councilors potentially get a copy of the contract with the vendor that was in question for the additional $15,000. Ironically enough, prior to that same contractor received an additional $30,000. The budget year, fiscal year 2023. The prior year, I believe it was an additional $30,000, and then on top of that was an additional $20,000 for an additional $50,000 on top of the $32,000. The year prior to that, it was an additional $30,000 plus another $17,000, and it went on. So for the life of me, I couldn't understand if we have all this more than doubled what the contract said, what was getting done. So I reached out, because I didn't know if any one of you would, to Mr. Bolstramitis, because I thought he was going to stay here and answer some questions. So So I reached out to the Director of Public Works, and I specifically asked him, when was the last time the ducts were cleaned at Town Hall, and who was the company that performed the service? And his answer was, there are no records that would suggest that the ducts in the Town Hall have never been cleaned. So that's at least 30 years that they've never been cleaned. Then I asked him, when was the last, the cleaning bid that was in question, that night stated that the night crew comes in to perform cleaning as part of the contract. How many people does this include for the night crew? There is no night crew. So I don't know if any of you guys got a copy of the bid, which I was referencing that night. And in that bid, it's referenced 3 times about the additional night crew that comes in to clean the town hall. Apparently, we're paying more than double, and even the basic contract, bid 17123, isn't being honored, okay? It says on the second page, night cleaning. All occupied offices and rooms shall be cleaned by the night crew. That's what we're paying the $32,000, let alone the additional $50,000 on top of it. It's not getting done. And I can't understand it because when you look at the contract, it says this. So my question to the mayor is, did you go down there since I asked about this in November 22nd to look at that? And if not, why?
I was told by Mr. Baltermitis that the ducts had been cleaned. If you're looking at the bid document itself, that's not necessarily what the document was that was supplied by the bidder. I don't believe we have had any night crews. I don't know that they bid that they would provide a night crew. So I'm not sure what document you're looking at. Is that the final contract or not? But I was informed that the vents were cleaned.
Okay, so he was informed that the vents were cleaned. Again, I suggest that you guys go down and take a look at that. And while I'm here, I see all this work that's going on back here right behind them. Can you just give us an update exactly what that is happening? Where half the wall is removed?
I'm not going to give you an update. I don't have all the details. Certainly, if you call Public Works, they'd be able to tell you.
Okay, and then one final one, because I thought that you'd reach out to me. That same meeting that I was asking you about Brothers parking lot in that building that was under contract to remove all the walls down to the basement slab based upon the contract, and it wasn't done. And I asked if you can find out why it wasn't done.
I inquired into that. The state standard is to be below ground level. The contract did not require removal of retaining walls. When they regraded the property, they found that even though the retaining walls had been brought to below ground level, they needed to be sufficiently removed to allow enough clearance for construction of the new parking lot. So an additional footage was removed. But state standards with regard to demolition, I'm told, do not require removal of the retaining walls to the basement level.
Okay, this is just another perfect example of the same thing. The bid specifications say that those walls had to be removed all the way down to the basement slab. It also goes on to say that there was an addendum for clarity to make sure all those walls are removed. The fact is that somebody put it on Facebook that looked like the new community pool was going into Brothers parking lot. They couldn't understand what all this digging was. The town paid twice for one project. One to the contractor who didn't perform the contract based upon the terms of the contract and the addendum. And then Public Works went in there and they removed all the walls all the way down to the basement slab. And it's troublesome to know that the taxpayers are paying 2-3 times for projects that have no oversight, just like the maintenance of this building. And it bothers me. Thank you.
Mr. Glidden.
Mike Glidden, Pomeroy Avenue. I just want to bring something to the council's attention that maybe you could look into and put on a future agenda. I was contacted by an owner of a salon on Center Street. She had 2 patrons that came in to get their hair, nails, skin treatment. They were there for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. They had a holiday package purchased by their children, significant other, etc. While they were in getting their services done, their cars were ticketed for violating the 2-hour parking limit on Center Street. And I know if John Letourneau was here, this was a subject years ago, and he'd disagree when I say this. It is not business friendly when we have a 2-hour limit on our main street, when we have personal service businesses such as salons and other establishments where a patron will be there for more than 2 hours. This business owner had to pay out of her pocket. This is another issue that I would like you to look into, because when they get their parking ticket, the only way you can appeal your parking ticket is you pay your fine in full. So we're having someone pay the fine, go to the hearing officer, and then if the hearing officer either nollies or waives the fines, we're generating a refund to this person, when it would just make more sense to say once the appeal is filed, the enforcement action is waived or stayed until the hearing officer makes a determination whether the fines would stay. But the bigger issue really is the 2-hour parking limit. I think it's time that you should that you should talk to the police and say whether we can change that or get rid of that. Because, like I said, why do we have business owners that are having patrons that come here, that go to their establishment, and then they're paying the fines for these people? And then on top of it, if one of these people were not someone who resides in Wallingford and they just drove to Wallingford to visit this place for the first time since they had their gift certificate that was given by the holidays, that's the impression we just gave. Real business friendly. Come do business with us where we ticket your car while you're getting your service done. Can't wait till you come back.
Mr. Chairman, I believe if a person appeals the ticket, that we have a hearing officer, you don't pay the ticket and then appeal, you appeal it.
Mayor, I got to correct you. It says on the fine to file an appeal, your fees and fines have to be paid in full. It's right in bold type on the bottom of it. It's something really that like I said, it's 2 issues. The larger issue is the 2-hour parking ticket, the 2-hour parking limit on Center Street. The other issue is just this thing. It's right, if you go to the police's webpage, it's right there, the form to file an appeal.
But that is not what happens. I will look at the form, but I do know that people file an appeal and they have not paid they either get waived or whatever.
Okay, so this individual, the business owner, called the police department because she had 2 customers irate, breathing fire. So, and then, like I said, she reached out of her pocket, says, here's the cash to go pay the fines. Because when she called, she said, how do they appeal the ticket? They said, oh, there's an application for an appeal. It's on our website. However, in order to file the appeal, your fees and fines have to be paid in full. So
well, then the police department told them incorrectly because that is not the way the appeal works.
I agree with you, but their form says that, and that's how it's being handled. And I think it's one of those things that you don't see unless these incidents come up, and it really should be looked at.
Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Quick question. Has Wood and Kaplan been paved yet? Mr. Mayor?
No, that has not, to my knowledge.
2 years. Do you know when that's going to be paved?
They had hoped to do it in the fall. Unfortunately, as I reported to the council, they needed to get the installation materials for the lights. They couldn't pave until the light foundations had been installed. They were installed at Brothers, but there was not time to do it at Kaplan Wooding.
Brothers was done. That's a lot that's not used. Wood and Kaplan is a used lot, and that one wasn't done, and it was kind of promised that it would be done when you were doing the Holy Trinity parking lot for the Simpson Court for Holy Trinity to be done. That lot would be done at the same time, or around the same time. It's 2 years now.
As I stated, they could not move forward because the lighting vendor was not able to obtain the materials for the base in order to have that cemented in the ground and allow the lights to be put in. They did,
I'm not, okay.
they did the work at Brothers. There was not time then in order to do Kaplan Wooding, but it was delayed for a significant period of time because of that materials.
So in 2 years,
issue.
they were only able to get enough for just the wooden the other lot. And just a quick question then, on so you do plan on doing it next year then?
As far as I know, it should be done in the spring.
We'll see. The train station didn't get their grant, so, as you know, and the question becomes, in the years past, there's been grants that have been available to repair the train station from the state, from the feds, all kinds of grants, historic, restoration fund capital, SHPO grants, steep grants, etc. Does the mayor, because nobody else can, does the mayor plan on applying for any of these grants to repair that building? Or do you have other ideas for that building?
No, we were invited to reapply for another round of the Community Challenge Grant. We're going to put together more information regarding a developer and potential plans. The other grants you talk about are typically historic preservation, and they require 20-year commitments to not change the use of the building. So at this point, I don't think we're willing to say we won't change the use in the building. The whole purpose, as expressed by the EDC, is to reuse the building for purposes to encourage investment and new vitality in that area of the downtown.
I don't think that it has to be 20 years of the same use according to the thing. They'd like a 20-year lease signed, but it doesn't have to be the same type of business.
No, it's not the lease. You have to commit on the historic one to not change the use for 20 years.
No. You can change you can't change the building, but if the business, you can't say that, because if you get a brew hub in there or whatever you wanted to do in there, and you had a historic grant applied there, and the business goes out of business, there's nothing they can do.
I know that the grant states that you cannot change the use.
That's just one grant, though. All right, so throw that one out. What about the other grants then? You don't plan, you're just going to go for this one grant, the main.
We have a desire, which I think is a good one, to repurpose the building, and by talking to developers, brokers, find out if there is real interest in it, incorporate that into our application, and pursue involvement in a second round.
Well, third round, but when's that round coming up?
I don't have a specific date. It's coming up in 2023. I'm not sure exactly when.
Have you started to already have the applicants come in to give you ideas? Have you had ABC Corporation come to you to say, all right, this is what we'd like to partner up with you to do?
We are beginning an effort to contact brokers and ultimately developers and find out what interest there is.
I hope that none of these grants bypass the town, and I would hope, because, you know, this application could be due in April for all you know. You have no idea at this particular point. And if you did look at the ones that do get the ones that did get approved, they are partnered with a lot of people, and usually with housing is the big thing. So, or open space. So, thank you.
All right, that's all we have for public question and answer. Can I get a motion to go into executive session, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-206B regarding pending litigation with respect to the workers' compensation claim settlement of Kevin Bouchard, former employee of the Wallingford Fire Department.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council in executive session. Thank you for clearing the chambers. Call the meeting back to order. Can I get a motion to come out of executive session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of coming out of executive session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. I declare the council back in public session. Can I get a motion on number 6, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we authorize the settlement in the pending workers' compensation claim of Kevin Bouchard, former employee of the Wallingford Fire Department, as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. On to item 7, which is the recommendation of the Town Council Subcommittee for a Town Building Maintenance Committee. Councilor Zandri, I think you chair this council committee.
Yeah, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, what we came up with, and we've got the other members here, so they can help keep me straight in case I've forgotten any part of the discussions that we had. We basically decided that we would recommend a 5-member committee and make it so that really anybody that was interested in serving on the committee could come forward. I believe it was to submit a item of interest to the town clerk's office. This made it so that individuals could come forward. It could still be people that nominate, like if someone came to any one of us, we could put them forward ourselves and say, you know, so-and-so is interested. I'd like to submit their request on their behalf. If the RTC or the DTC had individuals that they wanted to recommend, they could put them forward as well. We were trying to make it more available and more open. One of the considerations that we had discussed, and I was a big supporter of, is, you know, what about unaffiliated voters? A lot of times they get sidestepped in committee processes because it's the mayor's office that puts them forward. It's one of the 2 committees that puts them forward, and unless you've got a party affiliation, you don't get the opportunity to maybe be considered unless you happen to know that you can make the request independently or maybe approach a counselor to put you forward. So we wanted to kind of open it broadly in that fashion, understanding that minority rule representation still stands, which basically identifies the maximum number from any party that could serve on this committee, but it doesn't mean that we can't have lesser and or a mix of 2 parties and or unaffiliated. So that was the recommendation we were bringing forward.
Okay. Any other discussion from members on the committee? Is there a motion to take some action?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the town council approves the recommendation of the town council subcommittee for the town building maintenance committee to have 5 members to be chosen by the town council through an interview process.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Councilor Laffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm just restating my previous position. I've never had an issue getting anything resolved with the buildings and properties and everything. I'm concerned about the additional bureaucracy that will be created and the politics all involved. So I don't support the creation of the committee. Thanks.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I want to add this to the motion or if we can just discuss it amongst ourselves, but we also did consider a date in order to get the names of interested people into the town clerk, and the date we had discussed was January 16th, which would be the Monday before the Tuesday agenda meeting. And the reason for that was so that hopefully we would be able to possibly have the interviews at the next council meeting, or maybe before or after the council meeting, or during. However, the chairman chose that to happen, but I don't know if we want to put the date of January 16th as the deadline in the motion, or if we can just say that was hopefully what our deadline would be.
I mean, I think that's, part of me says that's an optimistic deadline. then again, I think we had 2 letters of interest today, so, you know, maybe it's not. But I leave it to the rest of the council to decide. Counselor Marone, did I see your hand?
No, sir, you did not.
Okay. Then, Counselor Allenson.
So I am also reiterating that I don't support the creation of this committee for all of the aforementioned reasons. In the last meeting, I believe that this is actually not, I don't think that this is going to add anything. In fact, I think it's going to be, it's adding another committee with no power, and you know, I think it's silly. I also think that giving 6 days from today's meeting to get it out to the public, and besides, you know, the interested parties that are in this room, I think that that's an aggressive date. I think that giving the public 2 to 3 weeks, so January 31st, is more than enough time. Many people have had this office for quite a long time without this maintenance committee. I think that giving the public a couple of weeks to figure out if they can commit the time to the meetings and to site visits, if this committee is formed, is a much more wise decision. Thank you.
So I'm just looking at a calendar. The 16th is actually Martin Luther King Day observed, so another factor to consider. Councilor Laffin.
Yeah, I agree, and I know I've stated my opposition, but it's clear it's already going to pass because there were 5 members of the subcommittee, and we only need 5 votes to do this. But that's only 6 days, including the holiday. I mean, I would agree with Councilor Allison just functionally. I mean, there was so much concern over, will everybody hear about the ARPA funding options and opportunities? You know, so that took like 60 to 90 days, and plus the 3 years we talked about it before that. But I would go 3 to 4 weeks at that point. If you're going to do it right and give everybody the opportunity to hear about it. Otherwise, the only people that know about it are the people that we've reached out to. And I think the concept is to make sure that it's out there.
Just another factor to consider is, you know, we tend to have, tonight possibly being a recent exception, we tend to have lengthy regular meetings. You know, it might be something we want to do before or after an ordinance committee meeting, which tend to be shorter. Councilor Zandri?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on the dates. I know we had discussed a date structure because we were trying to not get the details, so to speak, hung up on timelines, but we did not consider the fact of Martin Luther King Day. We were trying to meet the schedule of when we know that information needs to be released to you, Mr. Chairman, so for consideration of the next agenda going forward. But I see no reason why we can't be flexible with it and give it a little bit more time. I think there's been a little bit of lead-in already because there was a story in the newspaper, and after that story initially hit, we got, if I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2 queries on it, and then we did get a couple more today. But I'm good with pushing that timeline out an additional meeting, so that would take us out 2 weeks. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I think, you know, you're right. We don't want to have it lag and take too long to get kicked off, but we also don't want to have it happen so quickly that we rush it and somebody was on vacation this week. So I think, given all that, I don't know. Councilor Tata, you're the one that kind of socialized the idea of trying to maintain the date. Would you be flexible with the idea of pushing it out another meeting cycle? So that would be 2 more weeks.
Yeah, I was just reading the minutes, so I didn't really have an opinion either way, so that's fine with me.
Yeah. So I guess that would be like either a friendly amendment or an outline that we would like to try to take action with it over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Councilor Fishbein, did I see your hand?
Thank you. You know, I will caution that I support the creation of the committee tentatively, because I do recognize potential problems. And I don't want to create problems. But on the other hand, we have to look, I am required to look at past. You know, we start with, at least in my tenure, the animal shelter. A claim that there's no air conditioning, and for whatever reason, nobody wants to approach the town council to let them know about it. I still haven't heard whether or not the animal shelter has hot water, quite frankly. Even though we appropriated money to put in hot water, you would expect that we would have a report with regard to that. We have claims that ductwork is not being cleaned in certain buildings, and we have claims that it is being cleaned in some buildings. I don't know where the truth lies. We have claims that our parks are not safe. And then we have reports saying, well, they're not unsafe, so we have to shut them down. But then we have a PowerPoint presentation showing things that are at least of concern to me, and I would think would be of concern to others. So I don't want to micromanage. So I support this tentatively. If it becomes a monster, I will be the first to make a motion to get rid of it. But I think at least for where we are, I think it's appropriate. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Marone?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, the objections to me are funny because it's what we're talking about here is information, right? And so essentially what you're saying is you don't want the information. You know, and I think the problem is you walk around this building and you see the chunks flaking off the wall, and you look at the leak in the ceiling here and some of the other, you know, the ductwork concerns and whatnot. It's probably better if we don't know a lot of what's going on, because there's a lot of things in town that require some attention. You know, especially you look at the parks, you look at this building, you look at some of the public buildings. But I mean, unfortunately, you know, at some point you have to, you know, if you're the dad, you have to look at all of everything that's broken in the house, and you have to make a plan to fix it. So the budgets have not reflected, in the time that I've been on the council, budgets have not reflected the maintenance needs, what I feel are the maintenance needs of the town. And so I think that the council kind of needs to take the bull by the horns at this point and come up with our own plan to address some of these concerns, because we can't, you know, you can't let it go forever. The buildings aren't going to get newer or, you know, better maintained without some sort of attention. So I think the goal is information. You know, I think that many times, and if you've talked to me at length ever, you've heard me say the words, you know, government exists to protect the status quo. And I think that there's concerns about offending the status quo by taking a look at some of the issues in our town. So, you know, I didn't run for office because I wanted to sweep things under the carpet or you know, get on the, you know, to support individuals or anything. This is not about the administration. It's not about, you know, the council. This is about what really are our needs as a community. So that's why I support, you know, this particular committee. I really have no feelings as far as the time frame. I don't want to kick it down the road too far, but I think it's, you know, if that's what it's going to take to get quality people, I think we have some great people that have asked to be on the committee already. So so I'm looking forward to what information this can provide. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Allenson.
So, to say that we don't want to know because we're objecting because we don't want to know what's going on is objectionable in itself. I would say that Dad doesn't walk around the yard, or Mom doesn't walk around the yard and tell Dad what to do. Dad can walk the yard himself and look around and find what to do. So in my history, in all of the years that I've been involved in wanting to know what's going on, I've walked the yard myself. So why not, as a council, split up areas and walk them and then report back to each other? Because isn't that what we're essentially here for? If we can't see it with our own eyes, aren't we just passing off the work and saying to somebody, make me a honey-do list? Because anytime that I go and I make dinner, my husband does the dishes. I don't have to ask him. He just does it. We work together. Why not, as a second branch of the government, work together and divide it up and conquer it? I just don't see the need. we can also, of course, engage the public. And when the public wants to come forward and tell us their concerns about the buildings, we do take their commentary. But in order to do something and to see it done well, sometimes you have to look at it yourself and say, I want to make sure that somebody isn't making a mountain out of a molehill. So that's all. It's not because I don't want to see it, it's because I want to see it myself.
Oh, my goodness.
Mr. Chairman, may I retort?
Yeah, you're next, and then there's a couple others.
So, and to your point, Councilor Allenson, your point is well taken, which is why I walked some of the parks, with one of my fellow councilors to look at some of the issues, and I was a little surprised at some of what I found. And so I think that the scope of this issue is massive. And so I think that the 9 of us, getting in our cars and going to different public buildings is not going to cut it. The other thing is, we put up a presentation, and then there were some accusations of, politicking and some other things, and so I think taking some of these things outside of the political environment and giving it to people that aren't, elected officials makes sense in a lot of circumstances. So that's why I think it's nice to have a committee, have someone else, that can sort of look at these things outside of us. The other thing is I'm not a construction manager, right? Or I don't have a construction experience. Some of the people that have volunteered actually do, so that could be quite a useful asset. I think the more people from the public you get involved in anything, in government, the better it is. The more you shine a light on government, the better it is for the whole town. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to say pretty much what Councilor Marone just said. I don't have an expertise or background in maintenance or in construction, and I would hope that the committee members that we do appoint have some sort of background in trade, in the trades or in construction management, and are able to provide their expertise where we may be lacking that expertise. And so that's why, that's one of the reasons I support this committee, and I've spoken at length prior about my support for it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my comments are meant to be generic and not necessarily in response to everything that's been said, but I do want to make a couple of quick examples of some of the points that were made, which they're all good points, right? So to Councilor Allenson's points of, picking up the phone call or getting out there and doing it ourselves. Well, a lot of us already do that. And I see the level of work that's going to be required to do this. We can't do it as an add-on or as a part-time thing. Because I'll make an example out of just the earlier comments from public question and answer about all the mafia blocks. I can answer that question. I can answer the question on all the mafia blocks that are put in the parks on the town, because I've had residents come to me that weren't necessarily concerned about pushback, but they wouldn't come here. They called me. All the parks that get blocked off were originally because of, like the mayor said, the impact to Public Works of being able to clear those lots every single time that it snowed. That was their justification, that they did used to bring the blocks and remove them. Now they just, like Mr. Michael said, they push them aside. Now Upper Harrison, that is now a permanent thing. Those blocks will not be removed unless a directive or an order is given to Public Works. The last time that I spoke to Public Works, they've blocked off that area because there is some concern about the road edge along the cliff side of cars driving. There's no longer a barrier there that would keep cars from running off that edge if they got too close to the edge. There used to be an old wood, and I don't know if it was old logs or if it was the old wood tie system up there, but it all got leveled one winter when they were dumping snow over that hill. And rather than trying to repair that damage up there, they basically roped it off, and they've changed the outline of that area to no longer be a driving area, but a walking area. That was Public Works action. Now, I don't know whether or not they tied it in with Parks and Rec and discussed it, or if they came to a mutual decision. That part I don't know. But that I know that because of exposure of acting on some of these elements. And I will tell you that you know, a lot of this comes from people calling me. There are a few things I see here and there, but a lot of it is because people contact me. And I feel still that there are other people that would come forward if they felt like they didn't have to come to an elected official or a boss or a manager. A committee that's there to do some work, I think, is a healthy, neutral advocate for them to bring some of these things forward. And I think it's an opportunity to get some exposure on things and to say, look, we don't know what the different departments are going to need to address and handle some of these issues unless we can get a good handle on some of the work that might need to be done. We get a budget brought before us, we go to the department head, is this what you need? Is it enough? They nod their head yes. Sometimes they look to the mayor, sometimes they don't, but we don't really know. I would like to know. And I would like to know more than what I see myself. I would like to have people come forward and say, this has been lingering for months, this has been lingering for years. Maybe they know better than I do. The first time I saw it was X number of months ago. So I think that if we create this and nothing comes of it, and there's not a lot to do, which I would not believe would be the case, you'd always disband it. We've got people that are interested to do it. We've already seen that. We haven't really officially even voted on it. So we've got people coming forward now that want to serve on a committee that hypothetically could be voted no tonight. That's how much interest out for these few people. So I think it's there, and I'd like us to support it and see where it goes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, was skeptical about this committee. I believe the first time it was brought up, I believe it was an ordinance committee meeting. I did not support it. And what changed my mind was reading the minutes from the former maintenance committee, which was back in 1994 time frame. So when I looked at the minutes of that, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the issues that the committee at that time brought up, they were all addressed by the Director of Public Works. And a lot of it was, I think we could replicate a lot of this in the sense that there were a lot of minor issues that were just brought to someone's attention and then taken care of. So, for example, they mentioned 3 items on this one particular property, and the Public Works Director wrote back in the report, number 1, did not present any immediate danger to public, entire structure was removed. Number 2, basement windows sealed, windows checked, no hazard. Number 3, trash and area cleaned up. And then it moves on to the next property, the next, and the next. And seeing that made me very hopeful that we can, I think, kind of fix and clean up a lot of stuff that maybe we just aren't aware is an issue. And so that's what convinced me to give this committee a try, and that's why I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Attorney Farrell, I have a question for you. The committee as a whole, I mean, it's going to have FOI requirements, of course. If the committee as a whole is doing site visits, does that become a publicly noticed meeting that requires minutes being taken? Okay.
A bit of information, Mr. Chairman, on that. So if we had a building committee to build a building, and they visited a site, like where a building was being constructed, that wouldn't have to be a publicly noticed meeting, would it?
If a quorum does, yes, it does.
So how about if they were to decide at a meeting that they were going to visit these different buildings and they just go off and do it? Even if it's they all agree that 8 o'clock on Saturday they're going to go to 5 different buildings. They have to cite that?
If the whole committee is getting together and doing something, then it has to be publicly noticed. Public has the opportunity to attend, and minutes have to be taken.
So, because I'm confused by this. If they go to the official meeting that actually is noticed, and where the information is being kept, they're not going to meet Saturday morning at one location and break off. They're just going to go to those individual locations. Where would a concerned person from the public have to show up?
Well, you lost me a little bit. I mean,
So
are they? if they're leaving a meeting with a deadline of, you have 2 weeks within which to come back to the next meeting and have visited on your own time these sites, that's a way to avoid the meeting requirement.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm asking. So if they end a meeting and say, okay, so we're agreed that over the next 2 weeks, I'll take these 2 buildings and someone else takes 2, and then they just go off and do it, even if they all decide Saturday morning at 8 o'clock to do it, but they never meet, but they just go to those independent buildings, walk around the outside. That doesn't, I don't believe that needs to be cited as a meeting.
Well, my example is better than yours. If you're putting a time on it, and they're all gonna do it at the same time, that becomes a meeting.
Even though they don't physically go to one location.
Well, I mean, you're setting up an opportunity for the meeting to occur because of the fact that you're all putting them to work at the same time, and they could all end up at the same location.
All right, I guess that would be guidance we'd have to give them, that if they're gonna do, if they're gonna meet up before they take off to go to these separate buildings on any one particular day, that they'll have to notice that or not do that.
Or, right, but the committee needs to be aware that they're gonna have to deal with the FOI rules.
Okay, I trying not to make this more convoluted than it needs to be.
We didn't do that, the state legislature did that.
Oh, I wasn't placing blame, I was just shaking my finger in general.
Counselor Fishbein.
It's ironic when you choose to use rules and choose not to use rules. And the example I give is the get-together that we had at Community Pool. Most of us were there. When did we notice that meeting?
It was noticed.
I don't think
I will
so.
check. I'm near certain it was noticed. I'll check.
You know, I gave some examples of present structures that we have that gave rise for concern, but I just want to take a moment to address a future structure. We're presently working on a police department. And, you know, presently there are minutes of the steering committee that are on the, our town website. And the minutes of October 13 address PCBs, that building. PCBs, as most of us know, are carcinogens. People get cancer from PCBs. And we're going to put police officers in the building. And the minutes reflect that there is some reporting that came back and the recommendation has been made not to do any further testing, I guess because additional PCBs may arise. And the minutes reflect a recommendation, and I quote, he suggested making the draft report disappear. That's troubling. Have we told the police union? That's troubling. It's in the minutes. I think I rest my case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Tata.
I'll pass, thank you.
Counselor Carmody. I thought I saw your hand. Counselor Testa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always understood the meeting requirements, so forth, as having to do with if business is going to be discussed or conducted. That's a good rule of thumb. But at the same time, I remember being on the Wetlands Commission, and we would go on site visits. So it'd be good, we could always double check with the law department and the planning department and say, when you as a commission schedule a site visit, what are the guidelines you follow? I mean, is it if a quorum of the commission is going to visit the site, does it then have to be posted? It also has to do whether you're going to be sometimes it could have to do with whether you're actually going to be taking any action or any votes. So I think there's a fine line there. There's no reason we can't call the state and say, hey, if you're just going to visit a site to get information, and a quorum of your membership is going to be in attendance, does that constitute a meeting simply by your presence? We could get that answered. But I know a lot of it revolved around if you're going to be discussing business. Because you certainly don't have to post, the holiday dinner when a bunch of councilors are going to be getting together. You're not discussing business. You're not acting as a council. Regarding this commission, this committee, I just remind everybody, regardless of what they do in reporting back to us, we're not in any position to order anything anyway. Again, this is simply an accumulation of information that can then be forwarded to the administration with requests and suggestions for action. We're not going to go out there as a group examining everything that may be wrong in the town, even though most of us do go out and look at things and we hear about them. But I don't think there's any anything negative about creating this committee. It increases public participation in that there are people that, additional people in the community, volunteers that want to be involved and help. And, they're really out there just gathering information and coming back. And in a similar way to the Recreation Commission, not all the same, clearly. And the other point I want to make is, I can't believe this, but I don't recall ever hearing the term mafia block, and I was in construction. So I was like, is it really mean what I think it means? And I looked it up, and I'm just going to make a request that we never use that term again. Personally, I find it offensive, realistically. Where the name comes from, and even though it may be common nomenclature, and a fellow Italian American has used it, so I'm not calling you out on this, but let's not use that term. I'm all set. Thanks.
Councilor Zandri.
I just want to make a quick follow-up to Councilor Testa's points. I agree that even if the committee comes back, we probably can't do a whole heck of a lot, but at the same time, when individuals come forward or something we see ourselves, when we call, we can always make that quick call, Public Works, Park and Rec, hey, I didn't know about it. They're usually pretty quick to pick it up or take care of it, move it, clean it up, and I think this is another opportunity for that. We don't know who's going to reach out to us. We don't know what we're going to see. So I think that if a committee brings a laundry list forward, and we might have, if that day Park and Rec is here and Public Works is here, we can ask them outright. Would it be, can we get a truck to go around and do this, over the next week? All these small little quick hit items. Pick this up, take this out, and it, it just would be a lot quicker for us to be able to take care of it. It's almost no different than when we discuss something up here and we say, hey, Joe, could we move this to ordinance? And he just takes a quick note because he happens to be here. I think it's an opportunity. So I'm hoping everybody reviews it in that spirit and says, you know what, we've got an opportunity for getting people involved. I think a lot of times when people are on a committee, or even the people that call us independently, and then one of us, even if we tell them, you could always call Public Works, but I'll do it for you. I was going to call, Rob anyway on something, so I'll do it while I have. I honestly and truly believe that they feel like, oh my God, they picked all this up. That's awesome. And there's a little bit of pride, which I think some people are missing and really could use. And I think that as they feel like their efforts aren't wasted and they see some positive outcome, maybe it'll be contagious and spread and more people will want to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, first of all, I want to apologize. I think now that I saw some stuff and I recollect that the community pool thing may have been noticed, but I still want to pose a distinction, or perhaps there should be some direction. My understanding is that recently, on at least one occasion, members of Park and Rec Commission had toured some parks as a group, using this rule, those gatherings should also have been posted, because I certainly would have wanted to be there, as they're looking at what we've been talking about. I think that would be something that we should all be part of. So I don't know if, an inquiry and perhaps some direction along those lines. I know that a few years ago, we had sort of put into place a rule that somebody got appointed to a commission, they got a copy of the, the charter, the ethics, FOI, that kind of stuff. I don't know if any of these guys and gals, perhaps, have been trained on FOI, but I just bring that to your attention. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Lapp.
Mr. Chairman, just to answer that, the law department has provided instructions for boards and commissions regarding FOI, and they will be doing so again.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate everything Councilor Zandri just said, except that's how I feel it goes for me right now without needing a whole committee and everything. It's a quick phone call here or there. And we've talked about, well, I'm not a construction expert. I guess I do. All right, that's not a good example. I have construction background experience, but as other councilors may not, but Director of Public Works, Director of Parks and Recreation, like these are professionals and experts. So on some level, I just fear that it's going to become a political micromanagement thing. And I always say, do you want to make a big deal about it or do you want to get it done? And I've not had a problem in the 10 plus years of being on the council of getting these type of things looked at and taken care of.
Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
No.
Carmody?
Yes.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
No.
Barone?
Yes.
Tata?
Yes.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
No, the motion passes. On to item 8, which is for the committee to be charged by the council. Is there a motion for the charge? Councilor Tata.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend the charge to the committee be as follows. The committee shall periodically visit and inspect all town-owned properties, excluding Board of Education facilities, and report to the town council on the condition of said properties, including any potential problems and/or concerns, and advise how said problems and/or concerns should be addressed. The council reserves the right to assign priority properties for immediate review.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the council. Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring this up for discussion, and it probably is out of our purview. The line that says excluding Board of Education facilities, I started to think about that. I actually spoke to somebody earlier today who brought to my attention that the tennis courts at Sheehan are in disrepair, that the softball fields at the high schools are not up to par, and a number of other youth fields, sports league fields on school properties are not up to the standards that they should be. So I wonder if that line should be removed, if we can remove it, but I wanted to put that forth for discussion.
Councilor Fishbein.
So I guess it becomes problematic. An individual who is on the committee shows up at Sheehan and wants access to the building and wants to tour, let's say it's a male who wants to tour the women's bathrooms. I think, perhaps we get to the place by maybe partnering with the Board of Ed and asking them if they would like to have a similar committee.
Is your mic not on?
I'm sorry. No, it is. It is on. Sorry.
I don't know why I'm getting flashed at.
Oh, I was backing off. I think with regard to the properties that are not maintained by the Board of Ed, at least from my perspective, I think that's where we start. I would think access to Board of Ed property that we have put in their hands in trust, so to speak. I think it becomes problematic if we've got these committee members doing that kind of stuff, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to respond? Is that what you're asking for, Mr. Carmody?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I agree with that, Councilor Fishbein, and I appreciate your input on that. I think we can communicate and partner with the Board of Ed to address some of these issues. And I appreciate you bringing up the concerns of safety as well, because that could be cause for some issues. Thank you.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we did discuss this at the committee meeting, and it was, we did want to kind of include the Board of Education, properties, buildings, and so forth, but when we considered the additional 12 buildings that would be involved, and the scope of them, because they're much bigger facilities, square foot wise, and overall property size, we figured that it might be too much for a 5-person committee to try to bite off all at once in consideration of all the other things that they would be looking at townwide, parks and town building, town hall, and so forth. So we did kind of leave it open for, the success or failure of this committee. If it was very successful, a lot of positive action came out of it, we could always revisit it, augment the charge or change it. We didn't want to make it so that we wouldn't hear concerns. If someone came forward to the committee, and for example, I'll use Councilor Carmody's example of the tennis courts at Sheehan, the committee members could still mark that down and say, someone brought it to my attention, even though the schools weren't our purview. They could still put it in a report, like as an ancillary note. These were the buildings we were going to look at, and while we were out doing different things, we talked to different people. We have a couple of ancillary notes. Somebody mentioned something about the Sheehan courts or something, and we could still always follow up with that. And that kind of lends into what I wanted to also mention with respect to the verbiage that says, advising how said problems or concerns should be addressed as part of the motion that we're making. This isn't to dictate down to any town department, you will do this and you will do this a certain way. It's more that, hey, we found this issue with things left in a park, and we'd either like the elements to be picked up, cleaned up, or removed. Whatever makes sense for, the department. I wanted to make sure people understood that, because it's not like this committee is going to outline very specifically how something is going to be done. It's really to say that the committee has come to a conclusion that maybe something should be done. It's no different than if, again, an independent resident called up and said, hey, I saw this should be cleaned up. Or, hey, I saw this should be replaced because I think it's broken. And insisting that that's what they want done. Now, the department responsible for it might come back and say, well, we fixed it, we made it safe, we sanded down the rough edge, and that would be communicated back in the report, that back and forth report that we're getting. And I think that's another important element. A lot of times when people call us independently, and I'll just use Public Works as an example, they might go out and look at it and say, we didn't need to remove it, we just fixed it by tightening this up. And then we might get a call back if someone's really concerned. A lot of times they probably think, oh, nobody cares, no one did anything about it, because I can still see it when I drive by. Once in a while they'll call back, and we get an opportunity to update them and say, actually, Public Works took a look at it, it wasn't too bad, they tightened it up and it was sturdy, so they left it. And then that person would know, oh, that's great, they looked at it and they fixed it. So having again, a little bit more formality around this gives us the opportunity to have that little bit of back and forth, so that, again, people know that they've been heard, something got done, or the decision was that it's going to run its lifetime and we're going to replace the item. We made it a little bit more safe and we're going to get rid of it. But I wanted to call the outline, and now that this other element got brought up, that as the committee is out there, if people contact them, or if the public wants to contact us and say about anything that's on any of the things that fall under the purview of the Board of Education, it's totally fine to bring it up. It's not the main charge, but they'll take a note, just like we might. And at the same time, make sure that people understand that this is going to be, there needs to be flexibility in this charge with respect to things that are discovered and then bringing it to the attention of the department. They may make a command decision to do one thing or another, and you have to meet them halfway. So I just kind of wanted to outline that as an element. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Laffin?
Thank you. So the establishment battle for me was lost, but consistent with other issues I've handled over the last several years. It's not worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and consistent with how the dissenting Republicans 20 years ago voted maybe against the committee, but participated in the charge. I don't want certain elements to get lost or not considered. The Board of Ed thing, they have their own crews. They're separate. I don't want to make this bigger than it already is. And then, as Councilor Frischman said, it gets into access to the field and the properties. And I mean, it's already difficult to get onto school grounds during certain times of the day, depending on what's going on, even for events. Other comments, and maybe some of the people that drafted it or on the committee could just kind of jot these down and then answer them in their responses. Periodically, I feel like we've argued about vagueness in the past. What is periodically? Does this committee get complete control over that? Tied down to the last sentence that says the council reserves the right to assign. Is that assigned how? Do we need to have an agenda meeting, an agenda on a council meeting? Do we need to have a vote? Can a counselor just say, hey, look at this? Does a member of the public need to say, hey, look at this? The reporting back, I mean, again, everything is vague. Is this quarterly, monthly? Is it only as ordered? And if this is too much to include in the charge, maybe it's not necessary to include in the charge at all. What I worry about is when you do include in the charge that you're locking that in. And then the advise repair. There's no mention of, with participation or cooperation of the respective department or directors of said building or the area of property of the town, which I think would be somewhat crucial. Maybe even a recommendation in the charge to include or incorporate the respective leader of that area. That's it for now. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Councilor Allenson?
So while it's not really a maintenance study, the Board of Ed is undergoing a full facility study right now. It's about constructing new schools, renovating, et cetera, but a lot of this information will probably come up as part of that study. I will be your liaison in those meetings, so when you have questions, please feel free to ask, or obviously ask anybody on the Board of Ed or Superintendent Belize. And again, I do realize that that's not a maintenance study. However, I believe that a lot of the issues that we're seeing have to do with the age of a lot of the school buildings. The school buildings are not unique in their age in this town, so we know that everything is aging. And aging buildings require upkeep. So in the same interest as Councilor Laffin, I think that the last sentence should be struck. The council reserves the right to assign property. I mean, isn't that, as if we are interviewing this committee and working together with them, I would think that they wouldn't be obstinate about the fact that we're asking them to review something with priority as opposed to another thing. Secondly, maybe periodically can just be replaced with at least every 2 years. I don't know what, we have a lot of buildings. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't want to be overly aggressive, and I don't want to be under aggressive. So being new to this, I will defer to some of my more experienced counterparts in considering the more specific time period. But if they're going to do things and visit buildings, they should visit all of them in some set amount of time. But again, this is not an ordinanced committee, so we really only have the remainder of this term as the experimental term. So I say by the end of this year, maybe the committee shall review, visit and inspect all town properties. And then if we decide that this is something we're going to go forward with in an ordinance, we can make that a more specific charge going forward. Just looking, I thought I had another thing, but I am going to just leave it. Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to address some of Councilor Laffin's questions, and also Councilor Allenson went into the periodically. Periodically means it's a subjective test. So we contemplate 5 people on this body. This body meets. This body gets a list of the properties. Whether they decide to do it every day, that is on them. I can't think that would actually be the situation. So periodically doesn't bind them to anything. Certainly, if we don't hear from anyone, we're going to get the chairman before us and say, what are you doing? When are you doing it? Since we've given you the tools. So I don't think we need to change periodically because the rest of it deals with it. As far as cooperation with the department head, I would hope that if a group is going to go to a property, let's say the Public Works Garage, that they call Mr. Baltramitis beforehand and say, I'm the chairman of this committee. We would like to come and look at your facility on Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning. Is that okay with you? There's some level of cooperation. Now, certainly if that cooperation doesn't happen, then they can come back and say, we're having problems, right? So I think it's presumed that cooperation is necessary for something like that, but going to a park, they're not going to have to call Park and Rec to get access to the park unless they're looking to get inside of a facility. With regard to the last sentence, I think there's some value there in that we got a lot of property here in town, right? So it gives us the ability to say, we want you to look at the parks first, to prioritize that, or something else. We want to get information through this process, but when necessary, if something comes to our attention, I think it's appropriate for us to at least have the ability to direct to an area and to report back. And I just want to come back to the Board of Ed thing. While we are excluding the Board of Education facilities, nothing stops us from, somebody calls us and says, there's a lot of problems at Sheehan, let's just say, for instance, having an agenda item, having the Board of Education come here, we've heard some concerns. Would you be willing to work with this group that we already have with regard to this process? So I just want to, mention that that's a possibility also. So I think I addressed the concerns. I'm comfortable with the language at least going forward, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention that the charge that our committee came up with was the exact charge that was used for the prior committee back in the 90s, except for that we added that final sentence about assigning priority properties. And again, like I said before, since their committee seemed to work really well when I researched their minutes and read everything, we kind of just figured we'll stick with the same charge because it did have a positive outcome. I think the questions about saying that they'll advise us on what to do, or they'll advise a department head. First of all, they're going to come to us. They're not going, I think the idea is for us to get this info. And I think we thought, when we say advise, to me it means more, rather than just have a string of complaints or, a list of things that need to be fixed, I think to ask them to advise us, what do you want us to do about it? So for example, there's a broken window, okay? So they're gonna advise us to fix the broken window. So rather than just have a string of, one piece of litter over here, okay, advise you to pick up litter. I think that just makes it a little more proactive, and then we can go to whoever we need to and say, hey, would you mind fixing that broken window? So I think that's all that was meant by advise. And then the priority properties, we had discussed adding that. I think we all recognize that they will have limited time. That was kind of the reason for trying to get the members so quickly, like we were talking about before. They'll have less than a year because this will only last for this council's term unless it's, a new council puts it back or we put it into an ordinance. But assuming this is only going to last this term, it looks like now by the dates we were talking about, they probably won't be appointed until February, it looks like, or maybe the end of January. So just to say for us to assign priority properties, I think it's just a good way for us, if they don't get to every single property in town by the end of this council term, we can at least say, these are the ones that we think are most important, or these are the ones that we're getting the most complaints about, and just have them look at those first. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa.
Thank you. This may have been discussed, if so, just let me know, but is the intention that this committee keep their own minutes, or have we discussed a budget for administrative support?
They're going to need that.
Okay. So for now, it's going to come out of I assume our budget, like?
Presumably.
Okay. Just have to keep that in mind. They're going to meet. We need to have somebody.
There has to be a recording secretary, that's correct.
Yeah, talking to you, Deb.
You're ignoring you.
She's ignoring you're both wisely ignoring me. Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's a reminder to everybody that we can't overlook that. Thanks.
All right, that's all I see on the council. Questions or comments from the public? The rush is over. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
Sure. Yes.
Carmody?
Yes.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
No.
Marone?
Yes.
Tata?
Yes.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
No. The motion passes. There being no further business on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed can stay. I declare the meeting adjourned.